just to consider, what would my life be like if I never defended myself ever again in my entire life to anyone?
Peaceful.
What would happen? What bad would happen to you? At what point do you defend yourself and then it makes things better? That's not an admission of guilt, and it's not defensive. I want that trigger to go off in my head every single time. It's happening much more. It's the way to be. And it's a difference in perspective. It's not a difference in actual truth, like letting the dog out or not, right? So, yeah, so I think you're right. I think that's actually a pretty brilliant insight.
I mean, what I know for sure is that the surefire way to ruin a relationship is defensiveness.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's it. That's the number one.
Because it's not communication, it's defensiveness. Yeah. You can't communicate because you're both defensive.
Right.
That's why you can't communicate.
Yeah.
And so if you really want to have the best relationship you can have, you have to learn to not be defensive, especially women. Like, you have to throw out that, well, if I reason my case, it's like the time that women want to be logical, right?
Yeah.
They want a logical you
right.
when you're being emotional, and then men want a logical women when they're being emotional, and that's not the time to do it. The defensiveness will just cause you to go into the crazy cycle. It'll cause you to have 8-hour conversations that could have been easily dealt with. And like you said, most of the time, be it man or woman, if they have a problem, they got hurt, or they want to talk to you about something, just acknowledging what they're saying and apologizing and comforting them goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just such good life advice in general. I think about this a lot. And just to consider, what would my life be like if I never defended myself ever again in my entire life to anyone?
Peaceful.
What would happen? What bad would happen to you? At what point do you defend yourself and then it makes things better?
Right.
Almost never. Maybe if you're accused of a murder and you're like, no, I didn't do it, I have an alibi. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't really even call that being defensive, though. That's just,
yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like, in that
trying to find the actual killer.
But a majority of times when people attack us or accuse us or say we did something, it doesn't mean we have to admit guilt.
Right.
That's not the same thing. But if we just didn't defend ourselves, we would save ourselves so much trouble. People would like us more. We'd have better relationships. We would have a better life. But some reason within all of us, we're like, oh no, I have to defend myself. You know what I mean? And it's a hard thing to break, right? We've both struggled with this, and we've made some good progress.
Yeah, you knocked on the wood. Good job
on that. But what we have, because I know for me, I'm a lot quicker to catch it, and the more that we talk about it, the more that I want it to be an automatic trigger that goes off in my head that says, oh, wait, no, just don't say anything. Right. Just don't reply to that. Just, in fact, don't say, I didn't do that, or I didn't mean to do that. Just say, and don't admit guilt. Just say, oh, you're upset about that. Oh, that made you angry. Oh, that made you feel unloved. Just repeat back the feeling. That's not an admission of guilt, and it's not defensive. That's the, I want that trigger to go off in my head every single time. It's happening much more, but that it's the way to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, too, I was thinking about what you just said, and, being like, oh, you don't have to admit guilt. And even what you were like, oh, you feel like this, like, those are good things. But what is the harm of admitting that you did something wrong, even if you didn't? You know what I mean? Like, that person, like you said, will probably love you more, even if you didn't do it and you admitted to doing it.
That's a good point, actually. That does make sense.
Like, obviously, if it's something like I don't know, like, it's completely, like, you forgot to let the dog out and you left the dog outside or something and you didn't, and the dog's standing right there. I'm not saying to, like, be like, yes, I did leave the dog outside, and the dog's standing there like, I'm right here. But, you know what, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. That if it's something that is arbitrary or not a concrete thing, that what's the harm in just admitting it?
Right.
You know what I mean? If it's something where it's like, yeah, like you said, or like you stole my gun in Fortnite, you know, it clearly didn't happen. Then there's
That's what you did to me the other night. I'm like, what? It was like that episode of SpongeBob when Patrick eats his own candy bar and then he's like, SpongeBob, you ate my candy bar. And he's like, no, you ate it. And he's like, no, you were so sure I stole your gun too. I was like, okay, what?
But you're right. In many cases, not all cases, but in many cases, there's no harm in just owning up to things, because a lot of times it is something to own up to. It's just sometimes it's just a perspective.
Right.
It's like if someone says you were negligent about my feelings, or you didn't care about how I felt. Mm-hmm. That's an accusation, and that might not be, like, from your perspective, it was just an oversight. It mm-hmm. wasn't that you didn't care. It's just that you didn't remember or whatever it was.
Right.
To just say, you're right, I didn't care about your feelings, mm-hmm. feels a lot better. And it's a difference in perspective. It's not a difference in actual truth, like letting the dog out or not, right? So, yeah, so I think you're right. I think that's actually a pretty brilliant a brilliant insight.
I mean, I was just thinking about it. Like, I haven't said this before now, but I think too, there is something important to when you're the one expressing hurt, to also try your best. I get that it's hard when you're hurt, and a lot of emotions are being brought up, to express them as best as you can and to be vulnerable. And, you know, with us too, we talk about not saying things like never, because certain words will try to trigger defensiveness more, you know, being like, you never do this. And you know that there have been times when it has happened. It's just not happening enough for you.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, you never do this for me, be like, hey, I feel like you haven't been doing this very much lately or whatever, and I would like you to do more of it, is a better way to come about it than like, you never care about me, you never do these things. Like, it's different if they actually never do, but most of the time that's not even the case. And I'm not saying you have to be perfect, because like I just said, you know, you should admit it, even if they say you never do something and you know that you do.
Right.
You know,
it's better to just
It's better to just own up to it,
because then they feel understood and heard, and you know they don't really mean never, and they know they don't really mean it, you know, even though they shouldn't say that word. Yeah.
But it's just better to try to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
You know, because at the same time, even if you're the one hurt, you shouldn't try to be hurting your partner.
Right.
And that's the problem, right? Is like, people get hurt and then they justify hurting their partner by like calling them names or like blowing up because they're upset, or silent treatment or whatever it is. That's also wrong to do. That's why, like, you're not totally off the hook because you're upset. Yeah. Like, that doesn't justify acting poorly. I know a lot of women act this way too. When they get upset, they just do whatever they want. And they're like, well, I was upset.
Right.
Like, that's not okay. It's not okay for anybody to do that. So I don't want to say that if you're hurt, you get off scot-free, because you don't.
Yeah.
You're still responsible for how you react in your hurt and in your anger and whatever. And like we talked about earlier, you have to try to be the best version of yourself. And that means that even if your husband or your wife, when they get angry right now, maybe they do still blow up and act that way, you should be trying to do the right thing and come about it the right way, because you will influence them to also learn how to do that as well too. Like, I feel like as humans, we naturally are influenced to do the better thing.
Right. Yeah.
Like, obviously we can go down paths of doing wrong things and be influenced too, but most people will be influenced. I mean, look at children. They're more influenced by actions, and they can go to better actions by seeing their parents do better actions, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, the power of influence, you don't realize how much power you have. And I feel like if you're stuck in these cycles, right, where like you can't talk to each other, you're defensive, you act like we'll never get out of this. But you do need to try to do the best that you can, because you can get out of it. And when you do, like you said, you'll have this like peace, you'll have this like, I don't know, the like healthy, secure relationship that you won't want anything to ruin.